Okay, so for this tutorial, we're going to start adding the snow. If you can imagine, without some tools that Blender gives us, snow would be really difficult. You've got all these little objects, the pieces of snow, and you'd have to animate them each. But luckily, Blender doesn't make us do each piece of snow individually. This is going to use the part of Blender called the physics components, and we're going to use something called particle emission. So the first thing we need to do, this is just my hill with my path that I'm going to put the slider on. The first thing we need to do is we need to give the scene a particle emitter. This is the object that the snow is going to fall from. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mesh plane. Now you can actually make the, and I'm going to make it bigger, and then I'm going to put it high enough, so I'm going to grab it and put it high enough over the scene. Think of this as kind of the clouds. Okay, no snow is going to fall from above this plane that we've just made. So we want to make it so that it's a pretty good size and high enough. Now you can always move it if it's not high enough. And this is where the snow is going to fall from. The second thing we need to do is we need to go into edit mode, and then we need to subdivide this plane. And remember, that's W subdivide, because we need to make a bunch of points that the snow can fall from. Okay, and that's good. 6 times maybe. You don't need it two divided. Okay. Now that I've got my plane and I've got it subdivided, I'm going to go into this button, which we haven't used yet. It's the object button, and then under here is the particle button. It looks like an L with a bunch of yellow lines coming off of it. Okay, so we're going to click on that, and then this particle systems here we're going to add new. Okay, so that gives us a whole bunch of things that we can do with this particle system. This thing under the particle system where it says basic, this is the total amount of particles that it's going to use. The default is 1,000. That's too small for this. We need it to be more like 10,000. And that's the amount of snow that you're going to use. Okay. Now putting that higher would make the snow thicker. It would also increase the amount of time that it takes to animate and render the first time through. So we want to keep this high enough so that we can see the effect. But you can always tweak any of these, and that's why it's important to know what each of these buttons does. Okay. Here we can say emit from random. What that's going to do, if this button is clicked, is it's going to make it so that the snow randomly falls from each of these points. And we want the snow to fall kind of irregularly, so that's what we're going to do for that. Okay. I'll come back to the start in a second. The end means when the frame number that we want the this plane to stop emitting particles from. And since we're going to want it to snow the whole time, we want to make sure that this is higher than the amount of frames that our movie is going to use. So let's put it at 600 for now. That means that we can use, for 600 frames, the snow will be falling. Now the life here, this is the lifespan of the particles. Okay. It doesn't mean how long the snow is going to fall. It means how long each individual particle is going to last after it falls. Okay. So I would put that at 100. And again, you can tweak any of these. What that means is that if a particle shows up on frame 300, it'll disappear by frame 400. Okay. And then this is the randomness for what we want the particle life. Okay. We don't want every single snowflake lasting exactly 600 or 100 frames. So if you set this to 0.2, it'll introduce a little bit of randomness in that. Now, the global effects over here, there's acceleration in the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. Okay, and we're going to give it, because if you look here on my x and y, z-axis, you see the up and down is the z here, okay, which means that we want the snow to fall along this z-axis. Okay, and so we're going to give it a negative acceleration, meaning we want it to go down in the z-axis. Okay, so we're going to put this as negative 0.5. Now, if you make that higher, the snow will fall faster. And if you make it lower, the snow will fall slower. Okay, and it has to be negative because it's going down. Okay. Now, there's a lot of other things that we can do with the particles. But by putting these in, we've done enough to set the particle system working. And if we go back into object mode, and then we start clicking along the frames, okay, what we'll see first is that the snow kind of develops, okay, and then as we keep going, we'll see the snow is starting to fall. Now, the only ones falling this far down are the ones that came right away, at frame 1. But between frame 1 and frame 600, new particles will be being made. Okay. Now, this is where we realize that we're not giving them a long enough life. Look, none of them are going to fall any farther. I'm already to frame 129, and this is how far they get on 120. And after 100, they die out. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to make this longer. Let's make it 400. Okay. Now if we start over, we should see that the snow eventually falls far enough. Okay. Remember, when you get 400 frames past when the snowflake was born, it's going to disappear. So now it'll give us enough time for that snow to fall. Okay. If we wanted it to fall faster, we would change that z acceleration to like -0.8 or -0.9. Okay, but if you see here, by the time we're on frame 160, we've got a pretty good snowfall. Okay, now this isn't going to look right yet. Okay, we got to change more things about it. But if you render it, okay, you'll see a little bit what that frame will look like. Now it's always going to take longer. Okay, and you see all these snowflakes that have started to fall. Okay, that's what your scene is eventually going to look like. One more thing, as long as we're going to eventually make it look better, we might as well start that a little bit. Okay, I think it's easier to make a scene at night than a scene during the day. Okay, and so if you go into the shading button and then you click on this world here, okay, this is the background, and it's always that dark sky blue. So we're going to set this to night. Okay, so we're going to make it black. Okay, now if I render it, okay, we'll see that instead of on that blue black background, it's kind of on a it's on a white background, or a black background. Okay, and if we animate it, what we'll see is that one at a time it'll go through those frames and it'll calculate it so that after we animate it we can hit play and see the snowfall. Okay, now like I said, there's a ton of stuff to play with to make it look right. But as a basic particle system, there's the first tutorial on how to make snow. So go ahead and give that a try. Make sure you can get it to animate, make sure you can get it to fall right. And then after you get it to work right, play around with these. See what happens if you set this down to something like 3000. Maybe you don't want maybe you want the snow to be a lot less thick. Okay, and that's how you would do that. By the way, sometimes if you click through and you start going too fast, it'll just disappear. Let me see if I can get it to do that. Nope, it's keeping up with me. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's actually disappeared. It just means it lost the calculations. Okay, so now that I set this to 3000, you can see that there's a lot less snow. Play around with the end and the life, the randomness. Play around with the Z acceleration, and just try to get a good sense of how you would control this effect. Okay, and then the next tutorial will make it look more like snow instead of just like these shiny particles. Okay, thanks.